57 houses, every single one built on land that had belonged to my family for 4 generations. I counted them as they went up roof by roof right there on what used to be my pasture. And I let them finish every last one. The bulldozers would rumble in before dawn, carving up the fields where my grandfather taught me to ride, where my dad ran cattle through the fog and dust of Colorado mornings. There was diesel in the air, wet concrete, a whole century of sweat and stubbornness choking under the stench of progress. And every single morning there was Vivian Ashford Cross, HOA president, white Tesla gleaming clipboard at the ready, all business. She'd wave at me from the road, shouting out, "Thanks for being so reasonable about progress," like I was the mascot for surrender, the broke-down rancher giving up the old ways for a slice of suburbia. Even the sheriff, my own sister, the lawyer, they all thought I'd given up. But they were wrong. I was just biding my time because while Vivian stole my land with her backroom county deals and emergency zoning orders, she'd forgotten about the 80-year-old dam sitting upstream still under my control. 6 months back, this whole war started with a knock on my door and the smell of perfume that cost more than my monthly feed bill. I'll tell you, you could smell the difference between honest sweat and whatever concoction Vivian wore from 100 yards off. The Whitmore Ranch. 340 acres of Colorado high country. That land didn't belong to us. We belonged to it. My great-grandfather homesteaded here in 1889, built up piece by piece. My grandfather built the dam in '43, saving Denver from floods. My parents expanded it until black ice on Highway 34 took them both last January. After that, it was just me and Della, my sister teacher divorcee, as stubborn as the day is long. Then Vivian showed up fresh from Denver, hair that probably cost more than my pickup, lawyered up and ready to conquer. She slid right into the HOA presidency before the ink was dry on her moving boxes, haunting every county meeting, making speeches about environmental emergencies with a smile that could freeze coffee. She claimed our cattle were polluting Willow Creek, presented doctored photo soil samples that would have scared the EPA out of their shoes. Her independent analysis painted our ranch as a disaster zone. Next thing I knew, emergency zoning was pushed through, no public comment, just a letter in the mail and a crew of surveyors on my land before breakfast. Vivian showed up with the sheriff and a stack of papers. Progress, she called it, all sugar and steel. Your family's had a good run, but this land serves the greater community now. She never said theft, but you could taste it in the air. The bulldozers came at dawn, 5 of them, with workers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Vivian stood there in her supervisor of destruction outfit, designer jeans, spotless boots. She even had her crew wave at me every morning for psychological warfare, her words. The sheriff, Deputy Kane, showed up looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. He apologized, said the county tied his hands. I watched the soil of my childhood scraped away layer by layer, generations erased for Sunset Meadows. The newspaper painted me as the villain, selfish anti-progress endangering affordable housing. But while Vivian played PR games, Dela dug into the courthouse archives, finding the original 1889 land grants. Turns out our property line extended 60 feet beyond Vivian's claims, and more importantly, the water rights in the dam were legally separate from the land, protected under federal law. First in time, first in right. I still owned every drop flowing through Willow Creek. That's when I called in Tommy Chainlink McGrath, Dad's old Army buddy, now a civil engineer. Tommy's the kind of man who treats a bureaucratic mess like a crossword puzzle. He took one look at our dam paperwork and whistled. "Son, you don't just own that water. You control everything downstream. And those houses, every one of them sits in a federal flood zone." Vivian kept up her attacks. Facebook groups, public meetings, environmental scare stories. Parents terrified about their kids' tap water. Local businesses blacklisting my beef feed prices, skyrocketing overnight, Dela facing concerned parents at school. Then came the legal knockout, a restraining order barring me from the construction site, including my own family cemetery. But while the world saw a stubborn rancher losing everything, Dela and Tommy found gold in the courthouse basement. Old Army Corps documents, the original flood control agreements, federal regulations, mandatory water releases during peak snowmelt, specifically to prevent downstream flooding. No local law, no HOA, no judge could override that. We realized Vivian and her husband had mortgaged everything to build these homes. One heavy rain, one federal water release, and every house would be underwater. I started documenting everything: blueprints, water patterns, permits. I reached out to an investigative journalist, Rebecca Morrison, who smelled blood in the water. She saw a story bigger than Pine Ridge Falls, systematic corruption, federal law violations, HOA abuse. The days ticked down to Memorial Day, peak snow melt, mandatory flood release, the grand opening of Sunset Meadows. Vivian's last card was a sales blitz targeting military families, the elderly, anyone desperate for a home. The mortgage terms were criminal, the insurance worthless. Judge Caldwell signed off on eminent domain eviction scheduled for the day after the dam release. Rebecca uncovered insurance fraud policies that didn't cover flood damage from federal dam operations. The FBI got involved, media circled like buzzards. On May 23rd, just before dawn, Tommy and I stood at the dam. We checked the safety systems, made sure no one was in harm's way. Then we pulled the pins. The water thundered through Willow Creek, sweeping through the half-finished development with the force of a century of pent-up justice. By 6:30 a.m., the dream homes were islands in a brown sea, Vivian's Tesla stuck like a toy boat in the mud. She screamed sabotage, but the law and the cameras were on our side. The town meeting that night was packed. I walked in with the Army Corps manual, Della, with the old maps, Tommy with the flood data. We followed the law, I said, holding up page 32. Federal regulations require these water releases to prevent exactly what happened. The applause started slow, then built into a roar that shook the windows. Vivian was handcuffed by the FBI, her husband facing conspiracy charges the judge disbarred before the week was out. The ranch was restored, the houses condemned, and Pine Ridge Falls became famous not for corruption, but for the day federal law washed away local greed. The land became a protected habitat. The diner turned into a museum of environmental justice. Della started a scholarship program for environmental law students. Tommy got busy consulting on historical dam restorations. Rebecca's investigation swept across the West, exposing dozens of corrupt developments. The Willow Creek Festival brought thousands every year, celebrating the return of the valley to its roots. And me, I still sit on my porch with coffee that tastes like forgiveness, watching the water run clear and free, listening to the land that belongs to those who care for it. Sometimes patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. And sometimes justice takes the long way around, but when it comes, it rolls downhill and takes everything in its path. So let me ask you, when power collides with patience, who really wins? Have you ever seen justice served in a way that made you believe in karma? Drop your story below or tell me where you stand on the line between progress and preservation. I'll be reading, because some lessons you only learn when the water finally finds its level.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.